Princess Elowyn Dimmock twirled gracefully beneath the gleaming brass chandelier of the great hall. Her husband, Duke Sabre, caught her effortlessly in his firm embrace as they danced their first steps as a married couple. The royal court looked on, their gazes fixed. Young women admired the princess, some with wistful longing, others with unbridled envy. The young men watched too, imagining themselves in the Duke's place, spinning the radiant bride across the polished floor. "Tell me, Duke Sabre," Elowyn asked, her voice light with curiosity, "what awaits us at the Lone Isles?" She gazed up at him, her sapphire eyes glowing with anticipation. "It is winter there, so I'm afraid the weather will rival Garhana's chill," he replied, offering a faint smile. Elowyn tilted her head, feigning exasperation. "Surely there's more to share than the weather," she teased, her laughter like a delicate chime. "Our home awaits," the Duke said, his tone more somber. "The ancestral seat of my family." Elowyn hesitated, her enthusiasm tempered by his weighty reply. Still, she smiled, determined to find joy in his words. "I'm eager to see it, to make it a place where we raise our children. The gods willing, we shall be blessed with many," he said, his voice softening. "And the voyage?" she asked, her curiosity rekindled. "How long will it take?" 2 weeks' journey across the sea. Then I shall pray to the gods for calm waters." "They will surely answer your prayer," Duke Sabre replied, in a tone as dead as the look in his eyes. As the music faded, he released her hands to applaud the court musicians. Elowyn joined in, her clapping light and gracious. "Shall we?" the Duke asked, extending his arm. Elowyn nodded and placed her hand gently on his sleeve. He led her toward the head table at the back of the hall. Around them, the other tables began to fill as guests returned from the garden, their laughter and chatter swelling to fill the grand space. "Do they not look divine together?" Princess Karin asked, a sparkle of delight in her eyes, as she watched Elowyn and Duke Sabre make their way to the head table. "I suppose," Marcus replied with a shrug, barely lifting his gaze from his plate. "Are you not happy for her?" Karin pressed, her tone edged with disbelief. Marcus frowned, turning to his younger sister. "Of course I am happy. I just express it differently than the way you do." "Well, you do not sound happy," Karin shot back, crossing her arms. "Karin, do not quarrel with your brother," Queen Helena interjected softly. She forced a smile as Elowyn and Duke Sabre took their seats at the center of the head table. Prince Jamison, seated between the Queen and Marcus, rose with a mischievous grin. "Come, brother, many maidens await a prince's dance," he said, nudging Marcus. Marcus smirked and stood, the hint of a wink exchanged between them. Karin watched them go, sighing dramatically. "Mother, when will I get to dance?" "When one of the young gentlemen asks you, my dear," the Queen replied with a patient smile. Karin huffed, folding her arms as she watched her brothers disappear into the crowd. "Jamison, what do you make of the Duke's words earlier?" Marcus asked in a low voice as they strolled through the hall. Jamison sighed. "I think he believes he's acting in the best interest of the Isles. But speaking to father like that, I know, it unsettled me too." "I half expected father to have his tongue," Marcus said with a chuckle. "Even a king's authority has limits," Jamison replied thoughtfully. "This marriage is crucial, Marcus. It must succeed. We should pray to the gods that Elowyn finds favor with the Duke." Marcus followed his brother's gaze to their sister, seated beside the Duke. Elowyn's smile lit the room as she watched him closely. A familiar voice interrupted their conversation. "Well, if it isn't the two princes." They turned to see Lady Tiana Alexander emerging from a corridor. Her auburn hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and she held a goblet of wine in her hand. "Cousin, you look well," Jamison greeted her with a grin. "As do you both," Tiana replied, her eyes glinting with amusement. "Tell me, why are the land's most sought-after princes loitering here instead of dancing with the ladies watching your every move?" "We were just about to begin our hunt," Jamison quipped. Tiana joined them, her lavender gown catching the light. "And who has caught your eye?" "I have not had time to think of that yet," Marcus admitted. "And you, Jamison?" Tiana asked, arching a brow. "There is someone," Jamison confessed. "Lady Maria Winston looks particularly lovely today." The trio looked out into the great hall. They noticed Lady Maria stood by one of the tall brass lamp-posts. She was surrounded by young lords awaiting a chance to speak or dance with her. "She does indeed," Tiana agreed. "Will you speak with her?" "I intend to, though she seems occupied." "Ah, yes, but none of them are a prince," Tiana teased with a smile. "And where is your husband? Why are you not dancing with him?" Marcus asked, changing the subject. Tiana sighed, taking a sip from her goblet. "Does he seem interested in dancing?" The brothers scanned the room, spotting Lord Alexander, deep in conversation with Duke Saber and one of the Duke's captains near the head table. "I suppose not," Marcus said with a smirk. "Well then, have you had time to think?" Tiana said, turning back to him. "Who will you dance with?" Marcus surveyed the room, noting the many elegant young women, but none stirred his interest. He shook his head. "Not tonight, it seems." "Not one?" Jamison asked, surprised. "Uncle Jack appears to have found the best," Marcus said, nodding toward the center of the hall, where their uncle danced with Lady Jade Kent. Many eyes watched Prince Jack dance with Lady Jade, who was the picture of elegance. Her jet-black hair caressed her shoulders as she moved. She wore a striking red dress that matched the colors of her house. "They are to be wed," Jamison remarked. "I have heard," Tiana said with a sly smile. "How do you already know?" Marcus asked, raising a brow. "In a royal court, news travels faster than the wind," Tiana replied, raising her goblet to her lips. "Your uncle is truly blessed to marry such a beauty." Marcus watched them twirl across the hall, a wistful expression crossing his face. A lucky man indeed. Queen Helena knew a dance with her husband was expected, a performance for the nobles gathered in the great hall. She painted a faint smile on her lips as they moved together, the slow tempo of the music drawing her closer to King Henry than she preferred. Yet her irritation was not with him, nor with the dance or the musicians. It was with Prince Jack, whose voice carried above all others as he proclaimed the news of his upcoming wedding to Lady Jade Kent. Helena's gaze drifted to Jack as he paraded Lady Jade from one duke and duchess to the next, his laughter ringing through the hall. He seemed genuinely elated, but Helena knew better. This was Jack's paradise, the envy of every man and the longing of every woman. He loved being the center of attention. Even Henry's eyes betrayed a flicker of jealousy as they followed his younger brother and Lady Jade, one the kingdom's most dazzling gems. "I do wish your brother would refrain from making such a spectacle of himself and Lady Jade," Helena remarked quietly. Henry turned to her with a frown. "What do you mean? Do you not see? He is stealing the focus from our daughter's day. Will you not intervene?" Henry sighed, a note of weariness in his voice. "Helena, must you always find something to criticize? This is why you should have spoken to Seth before the day began. You knew I did not have time for that, and this is not criticism. It is the truth," she insisted. "Today is meant to honor Elowyn, and yet Jack has made it about himself. This is what he always does." "He's doing no harm," Henry replied evenly. "He's merely sharing his happiness. Can you not see that?" Helena huffed, turning her gaze toward the head table, where Elowyn sat alone with Karen. Despite being left largely to herself, Elowyn radiated a calm joy, her smile unshaken as she watched them dance. "Our daughter exudes grace and contentment," Henry said, his tone sharp but quiet. "If anything seems amiss, it's your bitter commentary." Helena's forced smile faded, though her eyes remained fixed on her daughter's. As the music came to an end, Henry released her hand and strode away without another word, leaving the Queen standing alone in the center of the hall. Lana Dimmock lingered in the shadows of the great hall, her bright blue eyes scanning the lively scene before her. The grand space was alive with music, laughter, and the rhythmic steps of dancers swirling under the glow of the chandeliers. Her gaze settled on her elder brother, Jamison, who had finally mustered the courage to ask Lady Maria Winston for a dance. A small smile curved her lips as she watched him lead the lady onto the floor. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, its golden rays slipping through the tall windows of the hall, Lana knew her moment had arrived. Tugging the hood of her black cloak over her golden hair, she slipped from her place at the edge of the hall and made her way toward the main entrance. Her steps were quick but silent, her heart beating with purpose. Near the door stood Duke Saber, his imposing frame illuminated by the soft glow of brass lampposts that guarded both ends of the door. He was deep in conversation with Lord Martin Alexander and his loyal captain, Cyprian. As Lana approached, she slowed her pace, keeping her face hidden beneath her hood. She felt his gaze flick toward her, a brief pause in his conversation, but she did not falter. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, before she averted her face, quickening her pace as she descended the stone staircase into the garden. Saber watched her flee, his curiosity piqued. A faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips as he turned back to his companions. Lana's feet found the familiar path to the heart of the royal gardens, a place that had always felt like a sanctuary. The limestone archway marked the entrance to a world far removed from the court. Here, nature reigned supreme. At the center of the garden lay a tranquil pond, its surface glistening with the reflection of the setting sun. Towering willow trees surrounded the pond, their drooping branches forming a natural curtain that swayed gently in the Cartanin breeze. Lana pushed through the willow tree branches as she entered the secluded space. She let the cloak slip from her shoulders, folding it neatly on the grass near the water's edge. Kneeling, she dipped her fingers into the cool water, tracing its surface with a wistful sigh. This garden had been her refuge for as long as she could remember, a place of quiet reflection, far from the judgmental whispers of court. She closed her eyes, letting the symphony of the garden fill her senses. Snap! Lana's eyes flew open, and she jumped to her feet, her hand darting to the golden dagger at her belt. She drew it swiftly, its blade gleaming in the fading light as she turned toward the sound. "Who's there?" Lana demanded, her voice steady but edged with caution. Silence answered her. "I am the daughter of the king. Show yourself," she commanded, her dagger poised to strike. A low, familiar voice replied, "It is only I." "Step into the light." The branches parted, revealing Duke Saber. He emerged slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender, his lips curling into a disarming smile. "Duke Saber?" Lana asked, lowering her blade slightly, but keeping it at her side. "I didn't mean to frighten you," he said smoothly. "I noticed you leaving the hall and thought to follow." "I see. Will you not be missed?" Lana replied curtly, her eyes narrowing as she watched him. "I was in search of some fresh air," Duke Saber said, as he took in a deep breath. "Shouldn't you be with Elowyn?" she asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. Saber's smile deepened. "Elowyn is well attended. Besides, I find myself drawn to quieter company tonight." Lana's unease grew as he took a deliberate step closer. "I've always admired you, Lana," he said softly, his gaze lingering on her. "Always out in your garden." "Admired me?" Lana let out a small laugh, her grip tightening on the dagger. "You know nothing of me, Duke Saber." "I know enough," he said, his tone low and measured. "Enough to see that you are more than what they say." Lana stepped back, her heels meeting the edge of the pond. Her breath quickened as Saber's expression shifted, his smile twisting into something darker. "You'll be accompanying Elowyn to the Isles, will you not?" "It is my father's will," she replied, her voice cold. Saber moved closer still, his gaze predatory. Lana lunged forward, attempting to dart past him, but his hand shot out, grabbing her arm. With a forceful shove, he threw her to the ground. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs and the blade from her grasp, her vision blurring as she struggled to focus. Her dagger lay on the ground, far from her. "Stop this at once!" A voice rang out, sharp and commanding. Through the haze, Lana saw a figure emerging from the shadows, Lord Carver Williamson. He strode forward, his eyes blazing with fury as he shoved Saber away from her. "This is a misunderstanding," Saber protested, his voice calm but laced with annoyance. "You've misjudged the situation." "I saw you throw her to the ground," Carver snapped, stepping protectively between Lana and the Duke. Saber's expression hardened, his voice dropping to a venomous growl. "Why defend her? She's just a bastard." "She is the king's daughter," Carver retorted firmly, his voice unwavering. "Your father will hear of this." Duke Saber sneered at Carver, but he stepped back, his gaze lingering on Lana with disdain, before he turned and disappeared into the shadows of the garden. Carver knelt beside Lana, his hand extended to help her up. "Are you hurt?" Lana shook her head, her voice soft as she accepted his hand. "Thank you." "I'm sorry you had to endure that," Carver said, his expression full of regret. Lana shook her head, brushing the dirt from her gown. "It is nothing new. He is right after all. I am just the king's bastard daughter." "Well," Carver said with a gentle smile, "would the king's daughter honor me with a dance?" "You are braver than I to ask Lana Dimmock for a dance," Lord Nimrod Alexander teased, his voice laced with mockery. Carver grinned, unfazed. "You see a bastard. I see the most beautiful girl at court." "I'll remind you, Carver, that you are speaking of my sister," Marcus interjected, his brow arching sharply. "Ah, yes, she is a lovely dancer. That is all," Carver replied with an exaggerated sigh, though his sly smile lingered. The royal wedding celebrations were drawing to a close for the night. Servants had begun clearing abandoned feasting tables, the clatter of silverware blending with the fading hum of conversation. Guests trickled out through the many hallways leading from the great hall, their laughter echoing faintly. Duke Saber remained seated at the head table, his expression somber as he watched Lady Lana from a distance. Though Elowyn chatted animatedly by his side, his focus never wavered. Lana, meanwhile, kept herself at the farthest end of the hall, engaged in conversation with Jamison and Lady Maria near the grand doors. She seemed oblivious to the Duke's lingering gaze, though Carver noted it with irritation. Nimrod broke the moment's lull, placing his hands on the shoulders of Marcus and Carver. "I have a question," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "What might that be?" Marcus asked, a smirk tugging at his lips. Nimrod leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Is it true that the Queen keeps a seer locked in the dungeons of the castle?" Marcus flinched, jerking back as if the very idea were offensive. "Nonsense. It is forbidden in Cartanin." "Are you sure?" Nimrod pressed. "The servants speak of it often, and they seem quite certain. They must be mistaken, or spreading rumors about things they don't understand," Marcus replied, his tone dismissive. Carver, silent until now, studied Marcus with a discerning gaze. "You look like you know more than you're letting on," Nimrod said, narrowing his eyes at Carver. "Perhaps I do," Carver replied coolly. "Then is it true?" Nimrod demanded, his excitement barely contained. Carver's gaze flicked to Marcus, who sighed heavily before turning away. Finally, Carver answered, "It is." Marcus groaned, rubbing his temples in frustration as Nimrod's face lit up with triumph. "I knew it!" Nimrod exclaimed, his voice louder than it should have been. "Shh!" Marcus hissed, glancing around nervously. "You must not speak of this to anyone." "I won't," Nimrod promised, his grin widening, "as long as I can see him." Marcus sighed, recognizing the inevitability of Nimrod's insistence. "This isn't as simple as you think. The trek to the dungeons is neither quick nor safe, especially on a night like this." He glanced toward the head table, where his father and mother sat in conversation with other nobles, blissfully unaware. After a long pause, Marcus shook his head in resignation. "Fine, follow me," he muttered, gesturing for them to come along.